Welcome, everybody, to the Spiritual Leadership Podcast. My name is Alana Kaivalya, and it is my great honor and pleasure today to introduce you to Geneva Montano. She has been a certified midwife for 8 years and in the practice of birth work for nearly 20. She's also certified in yoga, astrology, spiritual coaching, and various forms of womb healing work. I have identified her as an incredible expert in this space, and I wanted to bring her wisdom to you so that we can hopefully talk about and demystify some things around having a baby and things that I think many people are honestly not told. I myself do not have children, but the people that I know who have always say to me that there are just so many things that they're never told, don't talk about. So I wanted to bring Geneva on to this podcast so she can educate us and illuminate us on the best way to bring a baby into the world. And of course, she's also an author herself of the book, Wisdom from the Womb, Magic of a Baby-Led Birth. All right, Geneva, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be able to sit with you.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry for my little Freudian slip there, Wisdom from the Moon, but I feel like that's almost kind of
I know. It might be the second book.
Your second book first. So, one of the things that you've mentioned to me in our conversations is how important it is to bring the authority and the wisdom of birthing back into the hands of the woman and the baby. So can you tell us a little bit more about that idea, that concept?
Yeah, so as we know through epigenetics, like everything that our ancestors experienced, we carry in our DNA. So if we think back even, 50, 60 years to what women were experiencing in childbirth, like women were put to sleep for their births, but the drug that was given to them didn't actually make them not feel pain. It just made them remember it. So they have all of this pain for birth stored in their body, just not the memories of the pain. And so as babies in the womb, they're experiencing all of this pain and all this confusion from their mothers.
Mm-hmm.
And, female babies have their eggs already in their ovaries. So even these women's grandbabies were experiencing this pain and this confusion around birth. And so, in 2023, in the birthing system in America, we're already coming into it with this fear.
Right.
And I mean, even way before that, if
it wasn't our mothers, it was our grandmothers that had all this pain, isn't it?
And way before that, we can go back much further into birth, but midwives were killed as witches.
Oh, wow.
And anyone who was found seeking counsel from a midwife could also be put to death for, what is the phrase that they used? Guilty by association.
Oh my goodness.
And so, so we have these fears that we don't even know where they came from.
Right. And there's a lot of shame and a lot of pain in the whole birthing process. And I feel like there's just so much that people really don't want to talk about or demystify.
Yeah. So like when you get pregnant, you have this fear that you don't know where it came from. And you're like, okay, somebody just fix this. Tell me what to do. Tell me what's the safe way to have a baby. And, most people don't know about midwives or doulas or that they have choices at all. It's like, well, I'm going to go get my ultrasound and then I'm going to get my blood tests and then I'm going to get my epidural. And, it's like they're owning it as this is part of the experience that is expected when it doesn't have to be that way.
And really oriented to the medical side of things. And again, we're not here to vilify anything about the medical side of things, but there's so much more that occurs in a birthing process in terms of the actual human, the emotions, the psychology, the physiology, spending an entire 39 weeks with a human growing inside of your body that completely aside from all of the tests and ultrasounds and things that actually do need to be done, so amazing.
Yeah. So, birth is one of the most sacred experiences that we can have in our life. And, this portal is open and our spirit is open in a way, for that whole 40 weeks plus, but like really during the birthing process itself and then the postpartum time, it's just this, like, you can't not have a sacred experience.
Right. Right.
But
Women.
we can call that in so many different ways that, again, we don't even know about.
What do you think is the most sacred part of the experience? Because I know certainly women that I've spoken to have identified that as sacred, and I can't imagine that it wouldn't be. But if you were to codify it or describe it in some way, what do you think is so sacred about it?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I mean, I think really like we're holding open the portals during that time for this spirit to come in, and the portals are open, for some time before the spirit comes in, but then also after. Like, I really think that the postpartum time is like such a magical time and such an like forgotten time in our culture, that it's like, oh, if I'm going to be a super mom, then I need to be at Target 2 days postpartum, instead of like honoring this huge thing that our bodies have done, not just the birth, but the pregnancy, and growing another human inside of us, and then allowing our bodies to open, whether it's a vaginal birth, a cesarean, like the body opens to allow this new being in, and to really honor just the work that is. And
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I don't know that I've, again, I'm so glad to have you here. This is not my area of expertise necessarily. And the only thing that I really know about postpartum is that it's just the time after the birth. And I think the only thing we talk about is postpartum depression, not orienting to the baby, not bringing a new life into the world, not how to create connection. What are some kind of top things that you think women need to know about that time to continue in that sacred space and to facilitate that openness for the new baby?
Yeah, I think honestly, just remembering that it is a time is the first step, and like making a plan for it. In every traditional text, every mythology that there is something about those 40 days postpartum. It's almost always right around 40 days. Like in Ayurveda, it's 42. In the Bible, it's 40. In the Quran, it's 40. But like, there's something about like that amount of time that it takes for us to be, I mean, we'll never be the same, never be fully healed, but like to reintegrate with ourselves, and for our babies to kind of adjust to life in a body.
Yeah, it's a tough adjustment. I know in Bali, the tradition is that for that first 40 days or so, the baby actually never touches the ground and
Wow.
never the arms of a human.
That's so beautiful.
40 days, they're constantly held. So if mom can't hold the baby, they pass it to a family member. And of course, in Bali, generations live together. So you've always got an abundance of family members around. I know that sounds like an impossible task for people living in the West. We, have maybe one person or another person, two people living in our household, but in Balinesian communities, they've got quite a few people. So there's always someone really available to touch and hold this baby. And I do know in my work the importance of that physical touch connection and how it fosters brain development and growth and the creation of mirror neurons and empathy, and that can't be understated in terms of a human life and our existence. But what are some other,
and really, like, not just for the baby, but also for the mom, for the birthing person, that like we know the things that help heal during pregnancy, during birth, during postpartum, during life in general, like, nourishment, good food, being able to rest, having support, having physical touch, like those things that are so important to the baby are the same things that really this birthing person also needs in that postpartum time.
I mean, I think that's a really great point. And it feels to me so overlooked that help and the nurturing of the mother post birth, that, there is a healing process that needs to occur, that the body has really gone through, for lack of a better word, a trauma and needs to heal from the trauma. And I think, yeah, you're right. There's this superwoman idea that women have to bounce right back. I know there was one good friend of mine who had a baby. She ended up having a C-section. And within hours, her makeup was done, her hair was done, and she was having the newborn baby photos with her in like a perfect outfit. And I just
Wow.
looked at this and I thought to myself, it felt incongruous with the
Mhm.
experience that had just occurred, which is effectively a major surgery. And I really
Mhm.
did some inquiry around, what is it about society that tells us that women can't be messy, women can't
Yeah.
have trauma, women can't be real and vulnerable and exposed in this experience. And then I had another friend who had a baby, and it was like her hair was a mess. The baby still had, body fluids on it. The towels were all messed up around her. She's in the hospital bed, and that was her first image of the baby. And it was nice to have that juxtaposition of the two. What are you finding that maybe is shifting? Hopefully, as I asked the question, I'm hopeful that that maybe there's a shift, that we've gone from that experience of putting women to sleep and trying to almost negate entirely that birth experience. I actually remember seeing that in an episode of Mad Men. I don't know if you watched that show or not.
Haven't. Mm-mm.
It's a great show. And it was the first time, because I knew that they had put women to sleep in the 50s and 60s for birth experience, but the show did such a great job of displaying that and showing like the disoriented nature of the woman as she goes into the hospital room pregnant, and then the lights kind of flashing and then coming out, and she's just got this child, and like there's no connection between being pregnant and then having the baby. So going from that experience, so what it is we have now, and I know people now talk about going a birth plan, potentially having a natural birth. They have more hopefully options for how they'd like that birth process to go. How have you seen things shift over your 20 years in the field?
I mean, I think I've seen a lot of polarization. So there's, definitely the one camp that's like home birth, and, COVID definitely, overnight home birth wasn't crazy anymore because people didn't want to go to a hospital.
Right.
But, to have a home birth, to have a natural birth, to like find that power within yourself and like overcome the fears that it takes, like it's a lot of internal work to create that sacred experience and have a baby. So you can't just like be like, I'm afraid of a hospital, I'm going to have a home birth,
Yeah.
there's a lot more work that goes into it than that. And then there's also the other camp that is more like, what, I'd rather just schedule a C-section.
Hmm.
So I do think that more people are making conscious choices around their births, which I'm a fan of. Whatever that means for that person. Like, I really believe that, women are the experts on their own bodies, and they are the only person who's really connected to this baby. And this baby does also have an experience in mind when they choose to incarnate, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah.
But so it's up to the birthing person to really connect with the baby and understand what it is the baby needs and wants as well, and kind of make the two come together in some way.
How would you encourage a pregnant woman to connect with her baby and possibly get that communication? I mean, I know that, I do this with people in their bodies, right?
Yeah.
Through the work of the chakras, and ask them to feel into any sensations coming up within the body to try to get that internal wisdom, so that we then know our healing plan and process. But we're talking about an entire being here. How would you encourage a woman to get those messages and that communication and feel into, okay, what is our plan together on how we're going to initiate you into this world and this human life?
I mean, I think step one is like trusting that that like this baby can communicate.
Okay.
And like, we trust that our animals can communicate with us. We know that like so much of communication isn't even verbal.
Yeah.
We know that trees can communicate with each other. So like, why can't we trust, or, I took your spirit guide class, like that we can, communicate with so many different kinds of beings around us. Like, why would we not be able to communicate with something that's living inside of us? So trusting and then
Right.
listening.
Yeah.
And that just takes time, like every day, really trying to listen and sitting and connecting with the baby, meditating. And I think babies communicate in the way that their parent can hear. So sometimes it's through art, or sometimes it's through a song that comes on the radio, or a physical pain, or a physical pleasurable sensation, or but I believe that the babies will communicate in a way that their parent can hear.
Absolutely. I actually, it's the same wisdom in Jungian psychology and in the work that I do, where the messages always come through in the format that you can best understand.
Perfect.
So, in a meditation, whether you hear a message or whether you see an image or color, or whether you feel a sensation, I would agree that that is the thing that you trust and the thing that you lean into. And the other thing I also encourage with students and clients of mine is to strengthen that communication. It's like learning a language. When I teach the tarot cards, the tarot deck, I can definitely give everybody an overview of what a card means and explain the symbology of it and the mythology of it. And that gives you a template. But if that card comes up for a certain experience or circumstance, it's talking to you. And the more that you work with that, the stronger that communication, that language becomes, the more powerful it becomes, and the more clear you become in that back and forth communication. So, women have what you said, 40 weeks, 39, 40 weeks. You can learn a whole language.
Totally, yeah.
40 weeks, right? If you think of it as like an immersive experience, you drop yourself into a country, a few weeks later, you'll definitely have a good grasp of what people are saying. So if you've got 40 whole weeks to spend with this little being, and it's a 24-hour commitment.
Yeah. And
Right?
it's such a beautiful thing, that like you're never as close to a human in the world as you are when you're pregnant. And like, if you can, just like you said, like it's a 24-hour immersive experience. So if you can take that and just really enjoy it and like feel into it more, it's just, we, in our culture, pregnancy is this thing to be gotten through, and like it can be so beautiful and so fulfilling to be nurturing and so close to someone for this really brief amount of time in our lives.
What would you recommend to women who either maybe don't necessarily have a big spiritual practice, or maybe it's their first pregnancy? What could they do to help facilitate that communication? Would you recommend meditation? Would you recommend listening to music? Like, do you have kind of a protocol to give women this more spiritual orientation to their birthing experience?
Well, in my book, I have 40 practices that they could try, and they're all different things. So some of them are yoga, some, yoga as far as like the physical practice of yoga.
Yeah.
Some of it is meditation. Some of it is like, before you eat food, like just trying to be like, hey, baby, what do you want to eat right now? This apple or this piece of cheese? I don't know.
Yeah.
And just seeing like what you hear, what you get, painting, like there's different practices in there to help people find the way that they can hear baby. And then also my goal with my book and in my practice, I do home birth. So I work with mostly people who want a particular kind of experience. But many people don't have a home birth at the end. And so removing this shame from birth too, that like if things don't go the way that I planned them exactly, like what does that mean about me as a person? So these practices can help postpartum as well, like as we process our experiences and how they did or didn't go.
What are you finding are the common threads in the shame that women feel around a birth?
And I think a lot of it is like a distrust of their body, either before or afterwards, or, hidden trauma that wasn't dealt with. That, if we're carrying a lot of trauma in our sacral chakra, then it makes it really hard for that place to open and to feel safe.
Yeah.
And that's one of the great things about, finding a midwife where, my clients only see me, and, I have a partner, so they see me and another midwife, but it's just the two of us. And so it's a lot easier to build a trust relationship and for us to help people release that trauma, to do that sacral chakra work, or
Yeah.
there can be all sorts of trauma with birth, of like throat chakra, of not being able to speak up for themselves, or any number of things, but though the sacral chakra obviously is the main thing that we're working with.
Oh, I would say so for sure. I mean, I really love the idea that, you have this kind of lead in and a deadline. There's no getting out of the 39 to 40 weeks later, there will be a baby.
Yeah.
You can't put it off. You can't. There's going to be a deadline. You have this time, and you have this lead up. I love that you're working with women and preparing for that on more levels than only the medical level. I mean, thank goodness we have the medical level, and that we can go to the hospital if we need to, and that we have all options, or so many options available to create more safety for the process of birthing. I know historically the birth process has been incredibly dangerous for women. So thank goodness we have lots of options and capacity available in terms of medicine and what we can do and offer as options, and I think in my work, certainly one of the things that I always tell people is we are not just a physical body. This isn't just a medical experience. This is a very holistic experience, and can be used as a way for the woman to explore her healing, her trauma, her spirituality. And also, this is a spiritual path that just even, aside from also bringing the baby into the world, but this is her spiritual path of opening, of release, of healing. I think it's really beautiful that you're working with women on that level and helping to release some of the shame that has been built up in the last 25 years to the mostly patriarchal society.
And birth can be so healing for people who have had, sexual trauma or something where they couldn't use their voice, or did get trauma locked inside their bodies. I have I also train and mentor other birth workers, and one of our doulas was at a birth just last week that was really, really long, and the nurses kept saying, like, don't you need a break? Don't you want to go home? And she was like, I'm not going to leave her because she's had so much trauma already in her life, and I know that when she births this baby, she's going to release that trauma, and I want to be here for that.
Oh,
and I just thought that was so beautiful.
Beautiful. It's beautiful that she stayed, and that it wasn't a job. I mean, I understand that this is a profession, of course it is, but it's a spiritual profession. And I know that you're also certified as a spiritual leader and coach. And sometimes you just have to hold space for people. Sometimes you just have to allow for that to process. And, even though you get off at 11 p.m., like, this process may last longer. And I think that that's really, that to me speaks more to our ancestry and our history, and how women may have experienced birth in Native cultures, historical cultures, where it was a group experience, where there were other women with you to hold you through that experience, and not just a medical professional who's on the clock, who says, at 8 p.m. we have to make whatever decision, and based on a more job-based timeline, but rather that this is the spiritual event and we are all here for it. I think that's really special. I think that people who listen to this podcast and this conversation with you, I know, first of all, they're going to get a lot out of it. Second of all, they're going to be listening on the level of, oh my gosh, this is great information for if and when I get pregnant, or my friends do, or I know somebody who does. But I am also thinking that there might be people who listen to this podcast and think, wow, this sounds like sacred work. How might I get into it? So what might you recommend to someone who's interested in a spiritual path and midwifery and working with people in this way?
Yeah, I think that doula work works really well there's lots of yoga teachers who are also doulas, or, massage therapists who are also doulas. So yeah, for people who find that passion spark within them, I definitely would recommend looking into a doula workshop. I offer both birth and postpartum doula workshops.
Awesome.
Right now in person in Denver, and I do have an online doula mentorship program but there's also many other options. And I will have within the next year for sure. I would love to say it'd be less than that, but
Well, find a way to.
um,
I mean, you've got your website, genevamontano.com,
yep.
and maybe they'll make their way to Denver as a pilgrimage or contact you via the website and see what's possible.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. I
I think
do wound healing classes too, which are really like retreat type where you know get to come and get your own wounds healed while you're learning how to help others heal their sacral chakra wounds as well. And it's
that's amazing.
such a
Let me
fun
ask you
time.
one more question. As a woman who has never been pregnant and who doesn't have children, I imagine also that some of my listeners might fall into the category that I do. Can a woman who hasn't been pregnant or hasn't had children, can she do this work?
100%. Yeah. We often find that people who have not had babies actually come into it, you know, since you don't have your own story holding you back with like your own fears that have been planted there and your own, you know, your own story that you're more able to support someone in their own story instead of like trying to put your story onto them. And like, you know, we try to heal our own wounds through other people's experiences sometimes. And so like, you can't heal your wounds through somebody else's birth really. So just
That's
being able to support them with your
that's
blank slate is beautiful.
I love that. I love that you said that. I often feel like an outsider in that regard. Sometimes like, oh gosh, I don't have anything to offer, or what might I have to say about it? So that's it. And again, like I say that out loud and I identify that out loud because I imagine that there will be a listener who also thinks the same thing. So I love your perspective on, what we can come in as a blank slate and we can hold that space. And I definitely work of spiritual leadership on every level, and the ability for one human to guide another through a process and hold space for that, no matter whether we've been through that specific process or not.
Exactly.
Transformation, we're here for evolution, and we're here to help people heal whatever wounds they need to heal in whatever capacity we can assist in that. So that's really fantastic. I love that. Geneva, before we close out our podcast conversation today, is there anything else, if you have this open forum, that you definitely want to shout from the rooftops, or you definitely want people to know about the work that you do, or the women that you work with, the people that you work with?
Not necessarily about the people that I work with, but just that, it is your responsibility to your baby to find out your choices. And that, doesn't really, there's not a right way to have a baby except for the right way for your baby. And that, yeah, I love to hear that women learned all their choices and then really, made a choice, made a decision instead of just going with the flow. So I love birth stories. If anybody hears this podcast and then wants to send me their birth story or reach out if I can support you in any way, I am super happy to do that.
Well, I really want to just say I very much appreciate your open and non-judgmental approach to this, because again, from the outside looking in, I know that there are a lot of opinions, and even in just the spiritual world, some people get stuck in the one right, and I'm using air quotes here, way to do things, but there isn't. So thank you for pointing out that it is our responsibility to find all of the choices and to make the right ones for us and for the baby. I think that's the way to go. And I really appreciate that wisdom and advice, Geneva. Thank you so much for being here on the podcast with me today.
Thank you so much, Alana. It was really fun.
And make sure everybody who's listening to check out Geneva's website, genevamontano.com. She's developing some incredible programming and work for all of you, whether you are giving birth or want to work with people who are giving birth. She's an incredible resource for you, and it's been a pleasure and honor to speak with you. And we look forward to hearing more about how your work develops in the future.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.